kids and I used to have those blackouts. Well, some of those memories have been coming back to me.
There are moments in life we choose to remember.
Do you think that we'll be together forever?
And some memories we can never forget.
All I know is that by reading these journals, I might be able to get Kaylee back.
I'd think twice about what you're doing. You could wake up a lot more messed up than you are now.
I haven't seen results like this before.
But what if you could go back in time?
You are completely relaxed. Think of it like a movie. You can pause, rewind, or slow down.
Could you save the one person that mattered the most?
Honey, are you all right?
You. Incredible. I lost you once, and I'm not losing you again.
Evan, you never lost me. What are you talking about?
You got a nice life.
You stay away from us. What about Kaylee? Is she all right? If I go back to the beginning, I might be able to save her. Just tell me if you see anything weird. Weirder than this. Kaylee, that you were happy once. With me.
Why don't you go back and save me?
How are you doing this?
You wouldn't believe me if I told you.
You can't change who people are without destroying who they were.
Every time I try to go back in time and help someone, everything just goes wrong.
Oh my God, what did we do?
You can't play God.
The Butterfly Effect.
Hello YouTube and YouTubettes. Today we're going to review the movie The Butterfly Effect. Jonathan, tell us a little bit about this movie.
The Butterfly Effect was released in 2004 and was written and directed by Eric Bress and J. Mackie Gruber, and it stars Ashton Kutcher, Amy Smart, Eldon Henson, Eric Stoltz, Ethan Suplee, John Patrick Amadori, and several others, basically. This movie is basically about a young man played by Ashton Kutcher who realizes he has the ability to go back in time in certain moments of his life. He experiences blackouts throughout his young life, and when he focuses on some of his diary entries that are close to those moments, he can transport himself back to his young self during those moments and completely change things. And so basically when he experiences all these horrific traumatic events and that leads to the death of one of his close childhood friends, he's trying to find a way to change that. But the more things he tries to change, the more unforeseen consequences and often negative consequences he will see.
Alright, now we're going to talk about our favorite actor. Jonathan?
My favorite actor would be Eldon Henson. He plays one of the childhood friends of the main character, Evan. And Lenny, he's kind of like the kind of weak kid, doesn't get out too much, you know, kind of starts out as asthmatic, and depending on the timeline, he could be very withdrawn in another timeline, just very outgoing and a really nice guy. But he seemed to be the most natural of the actors, and some of that is I really liked him in the Marvel Netflix Daredevil series, and I think he, you know, shows some good acting chops. That even though he's not a huge character, he's a very likable character and actor, and so he's my favorite.
Mine was Amy Smart, who played the main girl in her 20s. And the reason I picked her is because I think her character had the most diverse when the changes were made.
Very true.
Very diverse personalities and differences from the butterfly effects. So that's why I picked Amy Smart. All right, least favorite actors, Jonathan.
Well, acting wasn't one of my favorite things about this movie, but one actor I honed in on, and I'm not sure of his name, but basically in this movie, because there are several different time periods, there's a time where the main character Evan and his friends are young kids, and there's a time when they are kind of young teenagers, like in middle school, and then there's a time when they are young adults. And well, one of the kids, Tommy, the middle actor for his character, I wasn't crazy about him. Basically, this kid's supposed to be this sociopath, and is supposed to be he's supposed to be very scary. And part of this, I don't want to blame the actor himself, but want to blame the casting. Because basically, at one moment, this character of Tommy, as a 13-year-old or 14-year-old kid, like beats up this guy who's 6 feet tall, but he's like very short. And there are times where there's another time where he overpowers all his friends, and it just doesn't seem believable to me. And so I don't want to blame him and be hard on him, but he was kind of my least favorite part because I'm just not buying this character.
All right, my least favorite was Eric Stoltz, who played the father of the girl and the boy that were next door to the main character, right? Partly it was because the character itself made me cringe.
Yeah,
but also, I don't think he was necessarily a great actor in what he was doing either. So, and might have something to do with the writing as well, in the sense that his reaction to him. Oh, could be spoilers in this review as well. The reaction he made to the boy when he said this was his reckoning. And it seemed like a very unrealistic reaction that somebody that's a pedophile would do. So, but anyway, that's who I picked, Eric Stoltz. All right, our favorite scene in the movie, Jonathan?
My favorite scene in the movie is when Evan, as a kid, is talking to his father in a mental institution. Now, there are two different scenes of this, and I'm talking about a later scene where, because in this scene, this is one of the scenes where he blacks out. Well, in one scene where he goes back to this certain event, he's talking to his father, and he realizes as he talks to his father, who is considered mentally deranged and violent and unstable, he realizes that his father had the same ability to do what he did. And basically his father is telling him that there's really nothing good you can do with this. This isn't working. And so it's kind of interesting to see, oh, this is generational.
Yeah, I have another one of those scenes where he changes, but it's when Evan is in prison and he shows a sign to his cellmate when he reads his diary and goes back in time. He stabs himself in the hand, and when he comes back, suddenly a hole has appeared, which kind of doesn't make sense because if he was already there in prison, that would have already been there according to the other guy's memory, but who knows anyway. So
yeah.
but it's kind of my favorite scene, just to see somebody see the change, I guess. So our scores for this, we'll start with acting. Our scores for acting. Jonathan?
My score would be a 6. I would say that the acting is fairly mediocre, which definitely sounds like very harsh, but it's not like there's one performance I saw this movie and I'm like, oh, this is the worst thing ever. Nothing that bad, but I don't think anyone really pulled me in that much. I thought there were some scenes that had some good acting, but overall, wasn't hugely impressed.
I don't know why I put a 10, but I put a 10 here. I think
Well.
it's because there was a lot of diversity. Like, one actor had to do different kinds of things because their character would completely change. And so, for that reason, I think I gave it a high mark. I may have to rethink that, but that's what I wrote down. All right, visual effect. Oh no, I'm sorry. Directing, producing. Jonathan.
I'll put 6.5. I will say, because there are a lot of different timelines in this movie, I know that this is definitely not an easy kind of movie to make, so I'll definitely get the director's props for that. But there was not much in the style that was, I mean, even though it's a very weird premise, I wouldn't say that the way the movie was filmed necessarily drew me in. I thought it was fairly average again. For a kind of film that's supposed to be spectacular, I felt the directing was okay. So 6.5 for me.
I gave it an 8. I guess just the changes. Now, after talking to him for a little while, I'm starting to rethink some of these like errors and crazy things. But I think I'm a huge fan of this movie. I think because it's just, you don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, I guess I give it an 8, and I'm not exactly sure why, but I just give it a visual effects score. Jonathan?
I gave it a 7. A lot of the major visual effects that happens in this film is when he starts going back in time during his blackouts. And so, and a lot of these effects aren't over elaborate. But the one thing is, what you do with the effect, okay, does it work? And I would say it did. Like, nothing made me go, oh wow, that was really bad. That looked so fake. And of course, because this is a, weird ability that, doesn't exist, or, most likely doesn't exist, I would say that, they did a good job overall with the effects. So I'll go with the 7.
I guess this is somewhat science fiction anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I gave it a 9, mainly in those scenes where he's, able to go back to his earlier time. And I guess, and we were going to include sound and editing. Sound, there wasn't much to that, but editing, there is a lot of editing. So 9 out of 10 is what I gave the effects. All right, a writing score. Jonathan?
I give the writing a 6. I don't give it below a 5 because it is an interesting concept, and it's kind of cool to kind of try to use chaos theory, which I know very little about, but something that's very, very interesting to show and try to put that in a movie. But ultimately, I made it fairly low because there are just a lot of plot holes in the script and just a lot of unrealistic situations that I can't go into them all in a whole lot of detail with the time limit. But just some characters are completely changed at different timelines, and there's kind of a nature versus nurture issue. It's like if one event happens differently to someone, they could become a completely different person. And while I think events definitely have a huge effect on us, I think the way it's shown in the movie is just a little bit too unrealistic for me.
I gave it a 7 out of 10. I think the concept is great in my opinion, but I think it's a little unrealistic in some of the why this change would do this or why this change would do that. In some cases, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So 7 out of 10 for me. All right. Soundtrack score, Jonathan?
The soundtrack wasn't very memorable as far as themes are concerned. There are definitely parts of the movie whenever there's tension, it definitely gets louder, and there's nothing that stood out of the soundtrack that was bad either. It just didn't leave the biggest effect on me, but enough of an effect during some of the moments of tension that I'll be like, okay, I'll give this a 6.
Yeah, I gave it a 6 as well. Yeah, I agree. It doesn't stick out to me in a way that it adds to the movie, or it doesn't. It's not bad enough to take away either. But yeah, I don't think it was that great of a soundtrack, so I give it a 6 out of 10. What it means, Jonathan?
What I see what this story means is how even when he had these great abilities to change some things in the past, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have control of all aspects of your life, and especially of other people's lives. And basically, he's trying to do things to make people's lives better, but sometimes they'll have negative impacts on them, sometimes they'll have a negative impact on him. And so ultimately it's about how how really we don't have as much control as we think we do.
And there could be spoilers, so if we haven't said that before. There's two things. Number one, yeah, changing how a little thing in the past can change a lot of things in the present. The other thing I thought of was destiny. Now there's two endings to this movie, and like I said, spoilers. One, the director's cut ending is where if the guy and girl, well, he basically has to kill himself in the womb because his life is just, for some reason, destiny. He wasn't meant to be. The other
This isn't a happy movie, by the way.
Yeah, the other ending, which is the released version, is where the guy and the girl can't be together because if they're together, everything around them goes to hell. So it's a bit about destiny as well, or like what destiny allows for people. Final scores, Jonathan?
I give this movie a 6.3. Overall, while an interesting concept and premise, I just don't think the execution worked with this movie. And also, if this movie had some other aspects of it that made it more entertaining, I might be able to forgive the execution. But if you haven't caught on with this movie, like, you know, there's mention of pedophilia, there's mention of prison rape in this movie and stuff like that, and nothing is very graphic in this movie, but there's just a whole lot of heaviness in it. And so, like, not only was this movie just, I just felt like it wasn't well written, I also just felt like that, man, if it wasn't well written, at least it could entertain me, but instead it was just too dark, and its darkness was not able to lift the story.
I gave it an 8.0, and while there are a lot of, I think, mistakes or things that don't make sense, I'm very entertained by this movie in the sense of it being a unique, I guess it's similar to movies like Frequency or Back to the Future in the sense of how changing the past can alter other things that you don't want to alter. So I gave it an 8.0. Thank you and have a wonderful day.